Okay, I'm late, I'm sick, I'm Mystica Inc., and let's catch up. And I'm already off schedule, so first things first, I'd like to introduce you to my studio. It needs some help. I ended up having to move my studio upstairs, where I usually make shirts, so it's a little bit messy in here. And it doesn't exactly fit my vibe. I truly wanted to try and remodel it and make it pretty neat, but I have some issues with that. I'm broke. I'm a starving artist. I had to think of some alternatives, some cheaper alternatives, and I'm quite happy with the results. Either way, I felt like this was a pretty big part of my week, and here's a few shots of me working on it. I finally had some work done, and I posted a few different photos about it on my Instagram, TikTok, and other social media. It didn't get any views, but what's new? Progress is progress. And in my opinion, for a low budget fix, I think it's looking pretty great. I still have to put up a lot of my decorations on the back wall, like oddities and art, but for a budget less than $100, I'm very happy with the results. Paint and wallpaper were just too expensive at this time. And if you haven't guessed it, I used a photo drop background and pinned it to my wall. Seems to work for now. Some of them are more pricey, and I went with a more expensive one just to be safe. I also bought way too many thumbtacks, but I'll deal with that later. Another very important thing that I worked on this week was actually my schedule. I meant to work on it on Sunday, but I had to work on it on Monday instead. Better late than never, I suppose. And I'm not very good at schedule making, but I'm trying my best. Note to self, this is where I messed up, and hopefully this helps other people that are watching the video. At this point, I ended up getting sick. Yeah, you heard me. Sick. I actually hadn't planned so far ahead that I could afford that. So my schedule ended up getting really crunched up, which sadly included this YouTube video and many future YouTube video projects I had in store. AKA, don't ignore some of those YouTube videos that say it's really important to keep up with your schedule and be ahead of the game. Another thing that's really important is script making. I never expected it to be so hard, and the script is very vital when it comes to voiceovering any videos like this. Here are some other things I've worked on since we last talked. P.S. I need to get better at filming sideways. I'm used to short form content, and that's up and down, so someone try and remind me, okay? Anyway, I was going to do a video on the 8-bit Duo. This is a relatively cheap Bluetooth controller that you can use with Procreate. It's cheaper than other name brand controllers that you can use for drawing, especially in Procreate. It's cute, small, and portable, and easy to move around. The biggest downside is that you have to also buy a keyboard in order to map the keys in Procreate. But honestly, buying the keyboard and the controller is still way less than other competing brands. I plan to do a full review once I use it and test it out, at least for a little bit. Next, this was all during Halloween, so I took a little trip to Spirit Halloween. Yeah. Someone please help this man. It was during this time that I started working on my Silent Hill watercolor paintings as well. I wanted it to be a full series, preferably 7 or 8 paintings total. I didn't use a bobblehead nurse, which is portrayed in Silent Hill 2, and I do plan to make one eventually. But I went more of a classic Silent Hill nurse. I did this in order to catch a wider audience, plus they're one of my favorite designs. As with all my watercolor paintings, I always start out with a sketch. The goal here is to not go too dark. I went pretty dark in some areas, but we will be lifting that up. If you want to try this out, you'll want to make sure that you erase any pencil lines before you put any water on the paper. Once you start adding water, it's like the graphite likes to stick to the paper a lot more, and it's harder to peel up and erase up, and sometimes you can smear and mess up your paint. Not to mention, if the paper is wet and you're trying to erase, you may end up damaging the paper. Next, I usually grab my art pucks. These aren't necessary, but I do find that they help out a lot. These are used to help lift up and tilt your paper. Tilting the paper helps watercolors spread at a more even and accurate rate, I guess. It's better than having it set straight up and down or flat on the table. These pieces in particular are more of a mixed media. I used some acrylics, but I did water them down, so I used the same method. First, I applied a thin wash. I basically put it all in the background and outlined the piece with it. Then I loosely and lightly put in some shadows. We have to remember that all watercolors lighten up as they dry, so keep that in mind. I'm using a medium round watercolor brush and lightly bringing in some brown tones to this piece. The nurses are usually dirty and decayed and just grungy overall, so I have a lot of work laid out for me. With watercolor, you want to go in lightly first and then do your darker colors later. At this point, I started to add in some rusty red tones. If you're curious about the colors I use specifically and the brands of paint, I'd be more than happy to go over those with you all. Just let me know in the comments. I'm trying to stay very loose here. I'm not sticking to any specific design or pattern. I'm just kind of going with it. I hope that makes sense. I have a bad habit of overworking pieces, and I'm trying to train myself not to think about it as much and stop being such a perfectionist. It holds me back more than I'd like to realize. And so I'd like to encourage you, the viewer, the inker, the artist, don't get so hung up on the small details. Just have fun and experiment with it. Watercolor is hard to control, and that scares away a lot of artists. But maybe you don't have to control it. Experiment and see what cool effects it does on its own. When it dries, it might just surprise you. I won't lie, I was actually really excited for this piece, and overall, at this point in the journey, I was really happy with it, and happy with the progress I had made. I took several photos and proceeded to post them on my social media, like Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I'm trying to post more frequently, and trying to schedule my pieces ahead of time. This is a critical step if I'm going to take my art more seriously. And to be honest, I thought I was already taking it seriously. I have been posting my art for years now, honestly. I'm 28, and I'm not getting any younger. I'm certainly not internet famous, and I'm kind of an obscure and unique artist. I hit a lot of niche categories, so I'm never really seen. With AI art and other artists getting put out of jobs, it's really high competition out there. And I hate that it is a competition. The algorithm is another hater of mine. I used to not post very frequently, and I'm trying to build it back up now. But there's such high standards that you have to follow, and it's not fun. Anyway, let's get back to painting, right? So yeah, where was I? Yeah, I made some little content videos for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc, etc. Just trying to bring some more hype into the piece, and inspire me as well. I know that it's a bad thing to look at your like counts and stuff like that. Artists sometimes expect it to be an approval or rating system. An approval of how good you are as an artist, and you really shouldn't, but many artists do, and it really hurts whenever a piece is ignored or just gets very little attention. It's much more inspiring if I have, like, tons and tons of likes on something or a few comments. Even one comment is enough to send me into a full manic party where I'm gonna paint for days. This is something I need to work on ignoring, and maybe you should think about it as well. The only real approval I need is my own. Which is really hard at this point, but we're gonna ignore it, okay? We're just keep going on the motivation streak. So yeah, painting. As you can see, I really got a lot of the grungy details into the background. This was just basically a glaze or an overlay, taking some thin layers and painting over it as it dries. Now I started adding all the little details with ink. It's just kind of something I like to do. You don't have to, certainly, but it just drives me crazy not to sometimes. And for this collection, I wanted to keep doing it. I had one little comment that kind of sent me into a spiral, and it wasn't a good idea. Someone had mentioned that they can't wait to see the face, and that made it stick in my head. The face. I have to make a face. Honestly, the nurse I was going for didn't have a face. You'll see how this affects it by the end. When I hyper-focus or lock in on a piece, I have a very hard time stopping my perfectionist, and it's sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. It varies in results. Wait a second, this shouldn't be here just yet. So yeah, I had made the face. The details actually really cool. And I sat there. I looked at it. I had just ended stream, and it was bothering me. I had to fix it. This was not the piece I had in mind, and I literally immediately started covering it up with acrylic mixed with watercolor paint. That's one of the biggest benefits of doing a mixed media piece. I wasn't too concerned if I messed up or anything like that, because I'd be able to fix it by the end. What I was worried about was the opinion of my fans. A lot of them actually really liked the detailed face, and I had just immediately, covered it up. But ultimately, this piece was made for me. I wanted to make it. I wanted to enjoy it. And so, I made my decision. And I kept going. At this point, I did my usual post. I posted about it on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, mostly in short format and in a few photos. Once the paint had dried, I went back and inked over it for the final time. I was now actually happy with the piece. And this is how it turned out. What do you think? If you made it to the very end of this video, I would like to say thank you. You can check out more of my stuff on my other social media pages. I have several of my other Silent Hill paintings already done, and I'm still going to be talking about them here on YouTube. Just know that we're a little bit behind. If you have any questions, you can always catch me on the Discord, or message me here on YouTube. Bye for now.